My family and I were living in Germany at the time when I was 10. They took us to see a concentration camp in Dachau, Germany, because they felt it was really important that we grapple with the consequences of decisions.
Welcome to Vulnerability Muscle, the empowering podcast challenging norms and guiding you to find strength and power through vulnerability. I'm your host, Reggie D. Ford. In a world that often portrays vulnerability as a sign of weakness, I believe it is a source of tremendous strength and authenticity. Through insightful conversations and thought provoking interviews, Vulnerability Muscle aims to redefine vulnerability and help listeners develop a new perspective on their own lives. Each episode of Vulnerability Muscle delves into a variety of topics such as mental health, social issues, and mindset shifts. We explore the power of vulnerability in healing, building resilience, and promoting personal growth, as well as fostering meaningful connections. This podcast provides practical tools and strategies to navigate life's challenges, overcome adversity, and create more inclusive and just environments for all people. Welcome. Today we have Andrea Torrey Balsara. Andrea, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, Reggie. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm an author and illustrator, and I write and illustrate for, doing picture books on up to young adult novels. Um, and that's kind of what I thought I was doing. And then all of a sudden, I learned about energy medicine, and it helped me heal so much from childhood buried trauma that I ended up studying to be a practitioner and a Reiki master. And so now I'm like trying to figure out, how do I combine these things, because they're so fascinating to me. Um, so that's where I'm at, and I am a very proud mom of two adult children and happily married, and I have three rescue dogs, and so I'm busy. Yeah,
Yes. Good. Well, you've already sparked my interest with so many good things. I cannot wait to
yeah.
dive deeper into this conversation. But before we do that, I want to ask you three quick rapid response questions. First thing that comes to mind, you let me know, okay?
Okay.
All right. What is something you do to relax when you're feeling stressed?
Well, if the weather's nice, I go outside, I take off my shoes, and I stand in the grass, and I just like dig my toes into the grass, and I imagine that I'm growing roots,
Mhm.
down to the center of the earth. And and I also like hold my hands up, so I'm like a V, and I just imagine that I have just light and grace and blessings just flowing through me. And then I just gather that into my heart. And it
Ooh,
works. It helps. It helps a lot.
wow.
Yeah.
I love that, and I
Yeah.
love the just picturing your feet growing roots into the ground.
Yeah.
Like, I really appreciate that, and will take that with me because I do
Yeah.
yoga and sometimes tree pose. I feel like that. So
Yeah.
that is a
Exactly.
powerful metaphor. Alright, next question. When you think or when you hear the word vulnerability, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
Being myself, not hiding. I mean, I can't tell you how many decades I have hidden and didn't even know I was hiding.
Mhm.
And so now that I'm at a place where I know what hiding looks like, and now I know who I really am, do I have the courage to be who I truly am, or do I just like take the easy way and hide?
Mhm.
So vulnerability to me is just accepting who I am and showing up as myself, not trying to be fancy or impress anyone, just me.
Mm, that's beautiful. I
Yeah.
and I already I have not read your book, I will be honest there, but I can tell just the way that you craft words that you're a fantastic writer,
Oh,
so that is
thank
that
you.
is a beautiful answer. And
Thank
then
you.
lastly, what is one of your favorite childhood memories?
I have a couple, and I've listened to other podcasts, so I was like, "Ah, which one do I choose?"
That's a good thing.
Yeah, I know, and I know I'm blessed. There was one that was just like stand out, like this moment where kind of the heavens and the earth just like were like, "Whoa." I was a child my family did a lot of mountain climbing, and so we had hiked to the top of this mountain range in Washington State called the Cascades. And I don't know where my family was, but all I remember, I have this flash of memory where I'm standing at the top of this beautiful mountain meadow, and I'm surrounded by mountains, like craggy peaks. As far as the eye can see, there isn't another human in sight. And in front of me, there were these tiny white flowers
Mm.
covering the whole meadow. And it was just this moment where you just know that you just know that this is a beautiful world, you know?
Yes. I love that. I love that you can find the beauty in this world because from your story and what I know a little bit about what you shared with me in a previous meeting, but there are dark moments as well.
Oh, yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think one of the things that stood out to me most was your ability to find the light throughout that darkness. Where did that ability come from?
Well, I I was really blessed to have parents who um, did their best. No parent is perfect. I certainly am not. But what they did do was they tried to instill in me and my brother and sister the idea that we're here to do our very best. And my mother was quietly religious. She wasn't someone who talked about it a lot, but every morning she'd have her Bible and she would pray and maybe write down some of her favorite verses, and just kind of, and just seeing her example, and then being around church people who were very kind to me, it helped me to recognize that there's not just darkness. But in our initial meeting, I had talked about something that had been pivotal, a pivotal moment for me, which is kind of what started me on this journey to write this particular book that I'm talking about, The Great and the Small. My family and I were living in Germany at the time when I was 10, and they took us to see a concentration camp in Dachau, Germany, because they felt it was really important that we grapple with the consequences of decisions, that we weren't just like, oh, sheltered. No, this is real life. How do you how do you show up in this world? Are you going to be someone who tries their best, or are you going to be someone who can go down a very dark road? And so as I'm walking through this concentration camp, and I saw the photos, and it was mind boggling, and my heart just felt like numb. I just felt dead. I was like dead walking on legs. That's all it was.
Mm,
And we walked to the end of this concentration camp. And at the very end, there's this nondescript building, and it was a little chapel. And I can remember, because of childhood trauma, I would separate from my body. So I remember kind of like hovering overhead as I'm, walking like a marionette to the chapel, feeling like there's no life. It's just darkness. And we opened up the door of the chapel, and a priest, was facing the altar. And as soon as he heard the door open, he whirled around and he walked to us, like no hesitation. He walked to us, his arms stretched wide and his face gleaming with a smile of pure love. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was very intuitive, and I could see energy and light in people. And his face was beaming, and around him every atom in the room, and this is a dark chapel, every atom was brilliantly radiating light, like it was a
mm,
million suns. And suddenly I was like, oh, there's hope.
mm,
This is the answer. It's
mm.
love. It's love.
It's love.
Yeah, it's love.
Wow. That is beautiful, and you highlight so greatly the, gray areas of life. Things
Yeah.
aren't just black or white, it is so gray, and there is good and bad, and I'm appreciative of your parents for exposing you to that early on and allowing you to see that within structures, within systems, that there can be both and not just either or.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was very
And
fortunate.
you seeing the atoms, it just like in the same imagery, I kind of saw the flowers that you were talking about when
Mhm.
you climbed, like it, like you see the light again.
Uh-huh.
It's amazing that
I
you
know.
find the light. So you spoke about the book, The Great and the Small.
Yeah,
Can you
this one.
describe? Yeah, can you describe one? You have a first edition of the book that
Yeah.
won many awards. Can you talk about the book and what it's about, and then kind of some of the success that you had with it early on, the first edition?
Well, the first edition really was, and this I wrote it was first published in 2017, and it had been an idea that had been simmering for years. And it really focused on my question that came from walking through that concentration camp and wondering what causes, like, and I've seen pictures of Hitler's baby pictures. He was innocent. He was a beautiful little baby. So what causes this beautiful innocent baby to grow up to become a monster?
Mm,
And what causes a beautiful little baby to grow up into a Nelson Mandela?
mhm,
So I was like, how does this happen? It's got to be choice. But I was like, how do I understand this? And my way of understanding things as an artist and as a writer is to write about it and dig and like try to figure it out. It wasn't like I wrote it knowing what everything was going to be. This was me kind of excavating what that was that I saw at the concentration camp and in the chapel.
mhm.
And the book in the first edition is about a colony of rats. And there is a leader, a very charismatic leader that they call the beloved chairman. And he's, a big rat. And I styled him after Stalin
Okay.
because Stalin was very charismatic. And what fascinated me about Stalin was not only did he get kind of a free pass in the West, we focus on Hitler, we hardly ever talk about Stalin, but he was a mass murderer of millions. And so I was like, okay, he's not getting a free pass.
Mm,
He is going to be like explored in this book. I want to understand how that happens.
wow.
So he was in the book. His nephew is this scrawny little rat named Finn. And Finn kind of has a chip on his shoulder. He wants to prove himself. He's an orphan who's been raised by his uncle that he adores. And the uncle has decided that the two legs, they're all evil. They're ugly. They deserve to die. And so he harnesses the bubonic plague and starts sending out squads of death rats, death squads, who've been infected with plague. And these are rats who are dissenters, so they're called wreckers. And
Mm,
this is all like from the communist playbook, except, they
mhm,
weren't rats, they were
mhm,
humans.
mhm,
So the wreckers were taken and deployed as biological weapons. And Finn is all in because he's been to a cancer research lab that he sees as a death chamber. From his perspective, it's like, this is evil. They're taking rats, they're killing them, they're cutting them open. The ugly two legs deserve to die. So
and the
he,
2 legs are humans in the
two legs
scenario.
are humans.
Mhm,
So he manages to find out where this researcher lives, and he leads a squad of plague rats to this house. And he ends up getting stuck in a trap and rescued by the researcher's daughter, a teenager named Ananda. And Ananda doesn't have the heart to kill Finn, and she secretly nurses him back to health. And the two of them, as they're interacting, as he's healing and she's like interacting with him, they learn to love each other.
mm.
He learns to see, beyond the otherness, beyond the us and them, and he sees her as someone that he loves. And so then Finn is faced with a choice. Does he continue the war or does he rebel against his uncle? And
Mm,
what does that look like? So that was the book one. And when it was published, I realized that Ananda's story it didn't have the depth that Finn's did. And I hadn't meant it to be that way. But I realized that I hadn't been ready to really go deep into my own history. I was like at that point, I was still cycling through PTSD all the time. Like
mm,
it was hard.
mm.
And so I was like, just kind of hanging on and I would write this book, but I wasn't ready to go there. And then with the energy medicine, I finally was like, I'm ready. I'm ready to look at what happened to me.
And would you say Ananda represents you in the book? Is that with the parallel there?
Yeah, the second edition, Ananda has my backstory.
Okay.
So,
And you
um,
and you were able through the energy work to have the courage to then tell that story. Do you mind first before getting into Ananda's story, speaking to what the energy work was for you and how and what some of the trauma that you were healing from was?
yeah, of course. When I was 5, my family and I went to go visit my grandparents who lived in Missouri, and someone at their church was posing as a nice person, and everybody thought he was nice, and somehow he separated me off. None of my family can remember this. They don't remember someone taking me away. But somehow I was separated from my family and I was molested. And and because I'd been so sheltered, I was just like my mind it's split. My and he told me it was my fault. And when you're little, you believe the adults, you don't know. And I'd never seen anything like what had happened to me. And so I was
Mm,
like, I'm evil, you know?
mm,
And I split from my body and I was watching from the ceiling, feeling sorry for the girl who was in the bed, but it was like, "Oh, glad it's not me."
mm,
So
yeah.
um I left his house and it was like a brain wipe just went and it was gone because he told me that if my grandparents knew, he probably didn't even remember my parents' name. So he used my grandparents' name. He said, if they knew, they wouldn't like, what you'd done. So I was like, no one can ever know. And so I buried it so deep, but it came out. These things always come out, you know,
Mhm.
violent nightmares, bulimia, and when I went through puberty, it was like just, the it went off the rails. I was really evil then. I was really, disgusting and I was acting out and, so and I couldn't figure out why I always it wasn't even that I was aware, but I was always like out of my body. It felt like I was a head with a sock attached.
Mm,
Nothing felt like nothing. It was just like I was a marionette.
yeah.
Um, and in my 20s, the memory came back. But when you've separated from your body, it's almost like you remember in Peter Pan where they have to sew his shadow back to his toe?
Yeah.
That's what it's like. It's like,
Mm,
you have to like sew your mind, your spirit, your soul back into this body. And so literally with energy medicine, I've been sewing myself back in. And I
wow.
still have spots where,
Yeah.
it's still thin, so I have to
Mhm,
like keep working at it, you
mhm.
know.
Yeah.
Um, but it's been
Wow.
a miracle that this was, I really, really believe that when we find ourselves in a cage, we also have the key.
Mm,
The key is in our pocket.
mhm.
We have to figure out what the key is and we have to use it, but we're never just set out, oh, well, you don't matter. No, each one of us matters. And when
Yes.
we go through these horrible things, we're also given so much to help us through those things.
Mm.
And that's why people like Nelson Mandela are the most beautiful people alive. Well, he's passed on because he went through hell
Yeah.
and he had to find that key within himself and rise above.
Wow. One, I wanna give honor to you in having the courage to share that story. I know it probably still isn't easy and wasn't easy when the memory first came back and you having to deal with the healing process that came along with that. So one, I thank you for sharing that and having the trust in me to share that. And I think it speaks to so many stories of abuse, right?
Mhm.
I'm volunteering for a camp coming up in a few weeks, and we do sexual abuse prevention trainings and things
Yeah.
like that. And you spoke clearly to like the grooming that
Yeah.
happens of separation and making you feel a certain way, and then when it happens making you feel bad so that you don't tell the safe adults in your life. And I just, if ever the echo comes back that you are bad, I want to echo to you that you are good and you are worthy and that you are enough just the way that you are. So
Thank
thank you
you.
for sharing that. Um, I and so you explain what energy healing or energy energy medicine is and what that looks like. How can someone dabble in that if they wanted to?
Everybody is energy. That's all anything is. Everything looks solid, but when you go down to a subatomic level, everything is just like, swirling around and vibrating. So our thoughts can affect how we feel. And so the very first thing that energy medicine teaches you is that your thoughts have incredible power. Um, so there are 9 different energy systems that I learned in this particular method. Uh, and one of the very, very simplest things that I do when I'm really feeling horrible is I just hold my head, and I can hold a point on the back of my head. And that's something that you can do when you're feeling afraid.
Mm,
So every morning I still wake up with this weird feeling in my stomach. Like it takes a while when you've had kind of this pattern of energy like for years and years. It's not like it goes away overnight. It can, it's like a very gradual release. And so I hold my forehead and the back of my head and I just breathe, and I breathe through that fear, and I let it release. And when it does release, it feels like a heat, almost like a hot flash, but it's almost like just something is sizzling off of you that
mm,
wasn't meant to be there.
mm,
And then after it's gone, it's like, oh, there's the ability to take a deep breath and to be more present, to be grounded. But there are other things, like there's so many things that we can do to feel like we inhabit our bodies, to feel like we're grounded. Um, Even things like when you feel estranged, sometimes all of us, every one of us feels sometimes like, I don't care. I don't want anybody, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't care.
yeah.
And if you take your hands over your heart and you make a heart shape over your heart,
Mm.
it's very interesting that
Practicing that.
activates a radiant circuit called a bridge circuit.
Mm,
And it's actually something that helps us reconnect with ourselves.
mm,
And if you start layering that with thoughts, so if I'm doing this and I can smile, and a smile also activates radiant circuits. So if I'm smiling and I'm breathing and I imagine myself filling with light, it's pretty hard to feel sad
mm,
when you've really kind of let yourself into that. And then, there are other simple things like feeling gratitude.
Yes.
That energy of gratitude, it just sends self-pity out the window. You're just like, wow, I have so much to be grateful for. Let me focus on that and not on this other crud that I can't control, because
Mm.
everybody has stuff,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
life.
Wow. Wow. You have such a calming presence, and I'm like, I'm gonna practice all of this when I get off the call, and I'm gonna look up more techniques. So thank you, and I'm sure some folks in the audience will do the same. You took that work and you
Mhm.
took healing from the traumas and continuing to heal from the
Yeah,
traumas that you've gone through, and you told a story from a different perspective,
yeah,
right? And that was the second edition of the
that's right.
great
Yeah,
and the small.
yeah.
How and where did that start, and tell us a little bit about Ananda's story from that perspective.
Well, it was really quite daunting. I looked at the first edition, it felt like a locked house, like, how do I get in? How do I, like, I described it in one of the articles I wrote, like, you're trying to get into this locked house, maybe knock down a few walls, rearrange the furniture, but you don't want to burn the house down. So,
Mhm.
you know, so I, I just thought, what have I got to lose? I have everything to gain. um, the first edition was hardly like, the people who read it really liked it, but because it was by a little indie publisher, very few people read it. So I thought, this is my chance. I have nothing to lose. It's just like one of those things where you're like, this is my life. I'm going to just be vulnerable and see what happens. And so I had all of these different elements that I wanted to weave in. And including, I added like a wish list thing that I wish I could do. She can communicate with animals, and I was like, yes, that would be so cool.
Yes.
So
That's like one of my like, if I had any superpower, it
yeah,
would be to be able to speak all the languages and to be able to communicate with animals and
yeah,
plants as well.
yeah,
So,
me
yeah,
too.
I'm there with you.
Yeah, me too. I would love it. And so I just started weaving in these scenes where she's, because I've you read about stories of trauma. But I've never read about someone who has buried trauma, where
Mhm,
they're like, they think they're crazy. They want to die. They're acting out. People around them kind of wonder if they're crazy. That was my life growing up. People were like, "Are you like, why did you overreact to this?" Or, "Why are you so melodramatic? Why? Why? Why?" I didn't know. I thought I was crazy. I
mm,
really did.
mm.
Like, full on, maybe they'll have to commit me,
Wow.
or maybe I need to just kill myself. There were times where it was just so hard to believe, when I couldn't figure out what was going on. And then, so to write it from her perspective helped me to forgive myself, because when I was growing up, I was hard on myself. It's like,
Mhm,
why can't I connect with people? Why do I do this? Why am I like this? And then reading it from her perspective, it was like, here I am crying, and I'm writing, and I'm crying, writing the scene, and I realized I'm describing what happened to me, and I'm crying.
mhm,
I was finally able to find that compassion for myself. Um, and another element, though, that I added was, I really, really feel it's important to always have that hero's journey
mhm,
running through a story.
mhm.
I have no time for stories that have no hope.
Yeah.
Zero time.
Mhm,
And so her journey wasn't just this, slog through the dark. It's also, got these moments of brilliant light where it's shining through the cracks of this darkness, and it's just enough to keep her going. And for anyone who's been through trauma, we know we get through it because of the kindness of others who've
absolutely.
stood. and shown the way to us when we were lost.
Absolutely. Wow. That is so beautiful, and I cannot wait to pick this book up. Like I cannot wait. I'm salivating over just understanding one, the backstory of you and how that inspired the characters in the book. And then to be able to compare and contrast that with the first edition. I'm
Yeah,
excited to really dive into that. I haven't nerded out about a book and like really like written notes and analyze chapter by chapter since like high school, but I
yeah,
think this is gonna be one of those situations for me.
I
And
would love
so,
that, and
yeah,
I would love to hear what you think of it. Yeah.
absolutely. I'm excited to share that. So yeah, we will definitely connect again when that happens. I have so many more questions, and we're gonna keep talking here. So, there is something a theme that comes up when I hear you speak, and it is perspective and seeing things from different perspectives. And you were able to find the self compassion for yourself through seeing it through a character in your book. Are there any other characters in your book that you have learned something about yourself from?
Well, I think each one of them is, I think as a writer, we always have something autobiographical in each character. Even the beloved chairman, like he's nicknamed Papa. Papa was a character that I loved too, because from Papa's perspective, everything he did was justified.
Mm,
And from his own perspective, he loved. He was just. He was righteous from his own perspective. And so if I had written him like, oh, what a horrible character, he would have come across as two dimensional.
mhm,
And I think, you know, there's something of Papa in each one of us, I believe. We each have the ability to do, you know, horrible evil. And we all have the ability to choose a better path. And the thing is that it's never like the big moment where you have to choose. It's always the little moments.
yeah,
It's the day-to-day things where you have that choice. Do I act this way or do I choose a new path? And that's the crux of it. That's what I discovered writing this book,
mm,
is that it's those little day-to-day things where you think, maybe it won't matter if I do this.
mm.
But then you're here and then you make another choice and
Slippery
suddenly
slope.
yeah, exactly. So I think each character I loved in their own ways, and each one reflected me in a way too, which is
Wow.
weird,
Yeah.
it is. It's weird.
Yes. I read somewhere that you volunteer at a donkey sanctuary, is that correct?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me what you do
Wonderful.
with the donkeys and more so what you learn from the donkeys.
When I started volunteering there, I have a daughter who's very intuitive and who would not let me not volunteer there. So my daughter had been volunteering there for a while and she was like, "Mom, you have to go." And I was like, "No, I have too much to do. No, no, no." And she said, "You have to go." And she would not stop. And she is relentless. She will not let go of something. So I was like, "All right, I'll go." So I show up. And the very first day I said to the sanctuary owner, I can only come every so often. And she's like, "Okay, all right." Well, I start working with the donkeys, and they're gentle, they're loving. Many of them have had just horrible histories, and yet they still let you come up and touch them and pet them, and they've opened their hearts again, even though they had every right to keep them closed.
Mm,
And then one day I was really sad about something, about a family situation. And I was there out scooping poops, scooping donkey poops, and I'm like crying. And these three big donkeys came to me and they stood around me in a circle and they just started kind of like laying their head on me and nuzzling my cheek with their lips, just giving me little kisses and just kind of standing there and being with me. And I felt so loved. And around that time, A donkey came who had been treated pretty badly, neglected. His teeth were worn down to nubs,
Mm.
and he was at death's door. His name was Darwin. And I had told Sheila, the sanctuary owner, that I had been doing energy work to help myself with PTSD. And Darwin was so ill that she said, "Do you think you could try to do your stuff on him?" And I was like, "Okay." I'd never done anything with animals. It had always been on people.
Mhm.
But I was like, "Okay, so I'm there trying to like do the Jedi thing, like, you know, and it worked. It
Wow.
worked. He lived and he thrived.
Wow.
It
That's
worked.
powerful.
It worked. And then he died a year and a half later because of eating something that was poisonous. But
Ah,
he had still had his happy ending.
mhm. Oh,
And
man.
so now when I go, I work with them using energy medicine. So I've adapted all of my human testing means to do it on donkeys, and I use myself as kind of it's like a pendulum test, where you kind of stand and you just kind of get an answer and then you go forward, or if it's a negative answer, you go backwards. So I
Mm.
do all of these tests, and I'm part of this team at the sanctuary that helps these beautiful animals feel good again.
Wow.
You know,
That's beautiful. You're a healer. I love that.
I
That's so
love it.
powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So I'm gonna come back to something because I've heard a couple of things that I'm just curious about, and you can let me know if it's worth exploring or not. But you spoke earlier about Hitler,
Mhm.
and seeing a baby picture of him and knowing that's a pure innocent child that the world then it happened or what happened, and then he turned into the adult that he became.
Right.
I'm curious if you've explored the perspective of your abuser and
Mhm.
how that process has gone, if you have, and what you've learned about grace or
Yeah.
compassion in that regard.
I think that's a wonderful question, and I think anyone who's been deeply hurt by another person has to reckon with that. And I have forgiven the abuser. I don't know his name, but I did forgive him. And one of the blessings that I've been given is a lot of intuition. And I'll just have these flashes of this vision. So for example, when Darwin died, and I was devastated. Darwin the donkey. Um, I suddenly had this vision of him as a youthful donkey, and he was surrounded by light, and he was happy. And I realized he's not dead. He's shifted his existence. He is where he loves, and he's happy. And so that was just like, wow. And I painted a picture of him as I saw. It's on my website.
Mhm.
When I started thinking about the man who abused me, I realized someone had done the same thing to him. You don't just grow up one day and start behaving in such a perverse, cruel way. Someone did it to him. And suddenly I had this image of him as an innocent child. And I thought, okay, you know,
Mhm.
I'll and I prayed for him and I said, go with God. I hope that you find peace. I hope that in some ways you can use this life now that he's, passed. He's probably in the realm of spirit. Use whatever capacity you have to help, to make a positive change, but stay away from me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I didn't want him near me.
yeah.
And I
Mm.
don't think that we have to, we can forgive, but we don't have to like embrace someone,
Absolutely.
with open arms. There was like a line, no, I don't want you near me, but God help you.
Yes. Wow, that is so beautiful. And you've offered so much to the listeners, and I'm curious if you had any advice to survivors, just from your experience and going through your healing journey. What advice would you give to survivors that would help them see the light?
To know that they are precious. They are precious. Every single human being is created pure and beautiful. And whatever messages they may have heard from people who are themselves, hurt, the truth is that they are beautiful. They have been, in my opinion, created by a loving creator who has endowed them with such beauty and innate power deep within that if they just kind of learn to relax, and it will take time, if they're patient on this journey towards the light, it will come. They will find their way back to themselves. They are not their abuse. They are not their grief. They are not their pain. They are a being of light and consciousness. That's who they are. That's who all of us are. That's who we need to be to get back to ourselves, to a place where we are one with everything, like standing in that meadow where everything is just, it's just perfection. We
Mm,
don't have to be like, oh, I need to be famous, I need to be rich, I need to be. No, those are okay if they happen. All right. They're neutral though. They don't really matter. What matters is the condition of our heart.
mm. God,
And it's
you.
like what Christ said, where he said, let the little children come to me. And
Mm,
unless you are like a child, and I think, in my opinion, what he meant was trust. Children
mhm,
don't worry. They don't worry if they're going to get a meal or worry if they're the top of a company, or they're just like, if they're well cared for children, they're happy and they're joyful and they trust. And
mm.
we're
Wow.
created by a bountiful grace filled creator who has given us this birthright of joy.
Mm,
It's our birthright.
yes. Wow. You're speaking directly to my soul right now. And I will identify, well, I am a survivor of many types of abuse and trauma, sexual being one of them. And hearing those words and the way that you eloquently spoke them really touches my heart in a beautiful way. And I've been so blessed. Like I feel, honestly, I feel like I have had an experience with an angel. This has
Oh,
been this has been truly, truly gratifying for me. And I don't want to even end it, but I'm curious to know, like, how can people, when is the book available? How can people find it? Where can people reach you? Things like that.
well, my website is www.torreybalsara.com. And on my website, I have information on doing a pre-order for the book. And I also have a contest that I'm running right now. If people pre-order it, and the details are in the website, I would do a 45-minute presentation on the hero's journey to like a church group, a religious faith group, youth group, whatever group. Um, and then there's another prize where it would be a 25-minute consultation with me about writing and illustrating, or about energy medicine, or
Mhm.
about the creative process and energy medicine. So I've got two of those 25-minute ones as well as the 45 minutes. So they would just need to go to my website, and hopefully it's working. I've been
Yeah.
I've had website issues that I
I
didn't
know the
even know were
pain.
there, and I looked at my website, and I was like, "What?" So I've been like, "Ah!" So I've been, like, trying to fix it. Hopefully, it's all sorted out, so they would just go there, click the link, and then follow the directions, and it would be just wonderful. Like, I just
Yes.
love doing energy work. I love writing and illustrating, and connecting with people on a more of a soul level.
Yes. This
Yeah.
this came up, and so I hope that I could get maybe 2 of those 25 minutes from you because I come because I've released a book now, right? People always not people always, but a lot of people ask about how to write, the process of writing, the inspiration behind writing.
Mhm.
If you could give some advice or some inspiration to someone who has experienced life and experienced trauma maybe, what would your inspiration be to get them to write that story, to tell that story?
Well, for one thing, if they would have to feel like it was something that they needed to tell. Um, it's really hard to get into writing. It's hard to get it published. It's hard to get anyone to read your books. So you got to do it because there's something inside you that says, I've got to do this. And so that's the very first thing, do they have this passion, this fire in the belly to write this story? And if so, then they need to make sure that they have trained themselves, that they've taken writing classes. If it's a memoir, take memoir classes, read memoirs. And I think one of the most important lessons that I got was to gather up a few mentor books. So
Mhm.
books where you're like, this is the book that I love. And I did that with the book Watership Down. I don't know if you ever read that.
No,
No, it's a book
that was
about
one
a
of your big okay.
it's a book about a warren of rabbits who are on their quest. And so I was like, I love this book. So I took the book and I marked it up and I had, dog-eared and highlighted. And so get some mentor books, one or two, and figure out what it is that you love about those books and write that down. Try to analyze these books and then figure out what is your story. What do you want to tell? Is it fiction? Is it memoir? And then start, after you've taken some writing classes, start outlining. And
Mhm.
one of the things I do is I have like magazine rack holders, and I have a magazine holder for each of my projects that are kind of simmering. Like,
Okay.
and I just have like, so this huge rack of magazine holders. And so because I'm also an illustrator, if I see like a comic book, it's like, oh, that'd be perfect for that book. I'll put it in the the magazine holder that's meant for that book.
Mm,
Or if I have a young adult novel that's just like, kind of simmering in the background, if I think of a scene, I'll scribble it down before it goes and then
mhm,
throw it in that thing. And that's how an idea can start to form over time.
mhm.
And one of my favorite things to do is to gather soundtracks.
Oh.
So I think of like the kind of the tone that I want for a story, and then I make a soundtrack and I start adding music to this thing. And then when
That's
I'm ready
creative.
to, yeah, and then when I'm ready to write, I'm like, okay, what scene would work with this music? And then I put it on a loop and I play it as loud as I can, and I'm just like writing and sometimes when things really start to work and your characters kind of come to life, I type with my eyes closed because I'm just like watching them do
Mm.
stuff. And I'm just like,
Mm,
I'm like the recorder.
that's
It's
really
really,
cool.
yeah, it's really
Wow.
fun. Yeah,
You've given me some ideas. That's pretty cool right there. I've
it
never
is.
I yeah, no, that's nice. Oh, man. Alright. I you the re any if you say another word about the writing process, I'm gonna have to start paying you, so Andrea, I appreciate you and your time, and I will make sure to include your website in the show notes.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
did you mention the release date of the book?
Oh, September 3rd,
September 3rd,
2024. Yeah.
2024. So, yes, y'all go out and get that. The Great and the Small
Yeah.
by is it AT on this book? Is that the
It is just
Yes.
because it's for young adults. I don't want
Yes.
little kids to read it
Yes.
and get
Yes.
frightened.
Yes. The
Yeah.
Great and the Small The Great and the Small by AT, Balsara.
Yes.
Uh Andrea, with all the things that you could be doing and all the places that you could be, I appreciate you being here with me embracing vulnerability.
Well, thank you so much. I think you're wonderful, and I think that what you're doing is wonderful. And I think as more of us vulnerability warriors connect around the globe, this will start to be something that changes people's lives.
Yes, I see it that way, and connects us in community because, as you mentioned
That's right.
earlier, that's where we heal, the
That's right.
safe and healthy community. So, thank you so
That's
much,
right.
and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you. You too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us for another powerful episode of Vulnerability Muscle. I hope you found inspiration and valuable insights that resonate with you. If you're enjoying this journey of self discovery and empowerment, there are a few ways you can support the podcast. First, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. If you've been moved by our conversations and the mission of redefining vulnerability, please consider leaving a review. Your feedback not only motivates us, but also helps others discover the podcast. Share your thoughts on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in. And don't forget to spread the word. Follow us on Instagram at Vulnerability Muscle for updates, and you can connect with me personally at Reggie D Ford on all platforms. Visit vulnerabilitymuscle.com for additional resources and upcoming episodes. And remember, embracing vulnerability is strength. Thanks for being a part of the journey. Until next time, stay empowered, stay vulnerable, and keep flexing that vulnerability muscle.